Alright, Shabbat Shalom. It's Yalak here again with another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. And this is April 16, 2017. And my lesson here is entitled today, The Antichrist is Here. And I understand some people look at Daniel and Revelations and they talk about the prophecies that say that Christ is coming, he's going to be fought against and so on, and then you got other scriptures or verses that say between those two books down in Revelations that the Antichrist is going to be fighting against Christ, the work of Christ and what he's doing and the salvation he's bringing to the Hebrews and to the earth. And different parts of the New Testament go ahead as well to say things like, if you don't believe in Jesus or this 2,000-year-old Messiah, that you are the Antichrist or you've got the spirit of the Antichrist. But it also points out that they're saying it's not just one person, because we grew up thinking in the Christian church that there was just this one particular person that's going to be the Antichrist and that he's the actual devil or Satan. But after a while, we got to learning that it actually says there's more than just one, so there are many. I'm going to show here that the Antichrist is here and has always been here, because, you know, we just grew up waiting for a long time to find this particular Antichrist, and we're wondering, okay, where is this Antichrist going to come from? Some say it's government, some say it's the devil or Lucifer, Satan, all kinds of things. But I'm going to show here now. So from Daniel chapter 7, I won't read that, but you know, I'm just repeating it just because a lot of people talk about that. And Revelations chapter 13, they talk about the prophecies about how Christ is going to be fought against and so on. Now, I want to run to 1 John chapter 2, verse 18 and verse 22 as well. It says, "Little children, it is the last time, and as ye have heard, that Antichrist shall come. Even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time." So he says there that there are many Antichrists, many, so not just one. Now, verse 22 says, "Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son." So what it's saying here is that the one who is identified as being the Antichrist denies both the Father and the Son. That's what this verse in particular is saying. So if you believe in both the Father and the Son, I guess you're not Antichrist, because it's a given that you'll accept the Father, but you also accept the Son. But if you only accept the Father but not the Son as well, then you are Antichrist. So I guess, you know, if you just apply that to anyone in general, then the people who don't believe in Christ, it would be an Antichrist. Now think of this, like with the Roman government way back then, in the times when the New Testament was being created or shortly before, anyone basically then who was not believing this, when the Roman Empire was rolling out the New Testament teachings, would then have been anti or against Christ. They're against what the Roman government was trying to set up. Now, I've taught you a number of lessons that say that the other people in the Roman Empire were on board with that, but that the Hebrews did not accept this Christ, so then they would be the Antichrist. But sure, you might have had, you know, maybe a couple of sellouts or people who got weak or something like that and accepted him. But in general, the nation of Israel not accepting this Christ would be the Antichrist. So when I say here that the Antichrist is here, we've always been here. Israel is the Antichrist, because we don't accept it. And now The only reason why in time some of us grew, but not all of us, but some of us grew to accepting this Christ or this Son that had his origin at Bethlehem or in New Testament times, is because it was forced on us. They held us at the point of the sword and slaughtered us because we didn't want to accept him, while the other people in the Roman Empire went ahead and accepted him, so they were saved by the Roman armies. But the Hebrews who fought this because they had their own laws that said, don't worship any other god, don't call in any other being and worship that being and so on. They're like, no. So they were anti-Christ. They were against the launch of this new religion based on this so-called Roman Hebrew Messiah. So they were anti-Christ and they were fought against and slaughtered, and those who survived ran into parts of Africa. So the Hebrews who don't believe, we are the Antichrist. Now technically I want to say all the Israelites are, but we know that some have taken over. But I mean, you just need to return to the first instructions and not to believe in this Christ. But Israel in general is the Antichrist, and that's what Daniel really is talking about if you look at it. But we just didn't understand it all along. So it's like when the mind shifts, then you can begin to understand that Daniel was talking about this. And even in the book of Revelations and these epistles here as well. So what the Bible is really telling you, or what the New Testament is telling you as well, is that the Antichrist is going to come, but there are actually many, it's not just one, and even now they already are here, or Antichrist already is here. Because Israel is already here. And Rome was certainly aware of that because they were right there ruling over the Hebrews, whose land they were ruling in and ruling over the Hebrews because they were taken down. So Israel is the Antichrist, and it's going to fight against this Jesus, because what you're not understanding is that Jesus has been around for a very long time. I've got a lesson to do, you know, who knows when I'll get around to it. I've got so many lessons with this New Testament, this fake series, it isn't funny. I've got so many lessons I can make. I'll be doing this for a long time, a very long time. But in one of the lessons, I get more excited about some of the lessons, and this other one I'm more excited about. And this is going to be a really big one for me, you know, in terms of my excitement level in preparing it. It's going to give real ancient history. It traces Jesus to the point where I, from my findings in my lots of searching, have come to the point where I've decided that Jesus has always been here on the earth, meaning his teaching. From what I have gathered in all this research I've been doing for a long time, Jesus has been worshipped from ancient times. And as far as I've found, from the very first religion on earth, he has been worshipped, and he has been worshipped by most, if not all, of the people on the earth as a main religion, except for the children of Israel. But we know the children of Israel eventually got into it, which was wrong. But I mean, that wasn't their cup of tea or their first instruction. But Jesus can be traced to just about every time era on the earth, as well as connected to every nation on the earth, from ancient times, from the first religion up until now, from the first religion up until now. The thing is that he just went under different names, and that's what's getting us. But it's even more than that, because remember, like when the nation split and you got the Tower of Babel, and you know, they split and went to different places. They've got all these religions that look like they have similar practices, but enough differences to make them look different. But when you look at them enough, sometimes one or two things give them away as being connected to other religions. Like they might use a similar name that another nation is using, who you might think is on the other side of the earth and don't have anything to do with them. Goes back to Babel. Goes back to ancient times. Another thing too is that they might have a lot of differences in their religions and their culture, but then they might have a certain national holiday that is the same as another country someplace else, and it's the same kind of celebration, but they might just be, the celebrations might be tailored slightly differently in some respects because of the culture of that people and how they've developed it over time. Sometimes it's just the same God that they're worshiping, whose name they have changed. But let's say two different countries now, or two different nations, they're worshiping the same God, but call the God by two different names. But, when you look at the teachings connected to that God, you realize that that God is talking about the same thing as the other God by a different name. But it's the same God, and that God is Jesus. And so it's not a surprise to me that he came into the Roman Empire and that he was built up and this religion comes. Because see, this Jesus religion that came up in the Roman Empire, who Hebrews think is their Hebrew Messiah, he was there before there was anything called Hebrews. He was there before the children of Jacob was set up as a nation. He was there before they came out of Egypt under Moses. His name is Jesus as we know him now, but he went under different names in times past. That's why you can see all kinds of, sometimes you'll do your reading, your searching, or watch a video, and you'll see that a lot of religions over the course of time, from ancient times, Egypt and before Egypt as well, that have the same kind of virgin birth kind of story and teaching, and crucifixion and death and resurrection of that particular heaven-sent Father to Son Savior, even born to a virgin. Why? Because it was the same Jesus all along, but he went under different names to different empires and at different times. And I remember in my last couple of years in Christianity, maybe 2 or 3 years before I left the Christian church, I saw videos like that talked about the different virgin births for the different religions. And I shrugged it off because Christians are supposed to do that because we've got all the truth. But the thing is that it bothered me, and for the first time in my life, even though I'd seen those kind of stuff before, for the first time I weighed it in my mind, and I had no explanation for it, but I tried to make it look like it doesn't matter, that there's some kind of trick and it's a lie. But I kept it in my mind, and it's only now by embracing Torah that I understand the deception in it all. But yeah, Jesus has been around for a long time. Let's run over to 1 John chapter 4. Now it seems I'm giving more New Testament verses here. Mostly I'm in the Old Testament. But I want to read some of this to show you what they're saying here. That the New Testament itself is actually telling you, but in kind of an unknown kind of way, that the Antichrist is the children of Israel, because the world is expected to receive it, to receive Jesus, to accept Jesus in some form or another. You go over the other side of the world, they're teaching Jesus in temples and so on. You just think they're talking about Buddha. 1 John 4 and verse 3, and every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. Yeah, you've been hearing that spirit should come, and it's now in the world. Yeah, because the Hebrews have always been. Right? They might not have always been called Hebrews, but I mean that line of people that the Most High was dealing with, we've always been here. And they're saying it's already in the world. So they're basically telling the Christians at that time, when these things were written, nearly 2,000 years ago, is that this spirit of Antichrist, or the Israelites, are now in the world. And they were the ones in history who were being fought against in a major way. Sure, the Romans fought some of their people and stifled and killed some of their people who didn't want to accept Jesus and who fought against it. But the majority of people who were killed for resisting Jesus was the Israelites, who had to run from their own land to save themselves from further slaughter because they were Antichrist. So the Antichrist is here already. It's the children of Israel who are scattered in slave lands. The Most High says he's going to gather us back, Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12, and we're going to call on him again and seek him. That's what it says. We're going to cry out to him and he's going to come and rescue us and so on. It does not say we're going to seek his son or they're going to seek us. It says they're going to seek him. Let's run to another one. This is the last one, 2 John chapter 1 and verse 7. Okay, 2 John chapter 1 and verse 7. Alright, and here it says, "For many deceivers are entered into the world, who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh." So they demonized us, calling us deceivers. Because the main ones, when I read the history, and that's why I don't understand all these people believing in Jesus who are talking about we need to keep the laws. How come you can't see this in history and you've been studying biblical history way before I was doing it? As in the Christian church, I didn't concern myself with biblical history. Sure, I read a thing or two, but it wasn't of interest. I just left off of it. But when I read, I see this stuff is all there. It says in history that the Hebrews resisted and were slaughtered. If they were resisting the Jesus of the Roman Empire, that means they were not a part of it, not a part of the Jesus worship. They wanted their laws back. And notice that when the Roman army, 70 AD, when they slaughtered as many Hebrews as they could, and they went taking the stuff out of the temple, one documentary says that they went in looking for the Hebrew God, because normally temples would have a god, like an idol, and then they would just go and take that god to keep for themselves or smash it and damage it, get rid of it, to show that they had overcome that people and their God. They went and they couldn't find the Hebrew God. Why? Because he cannot be seen. So how can the Hebrews come and worship a Jesus Elohim that can be seen and that walked among them, and mere man who is heathen is nailing him and killing him? The Hebrews had a concept of a God that was not normally just walking around eating food with you and begging for water when he made the seas and the oceans and so on. They had a concept of an unseen God like that. You didn't just walk up to him and see him when you were in the marketplace. So it's fitting that they didn't see him when they went into the temple to ransack the temple, the Romans that is, right? But they took all the precious things from the temple and so on. So the Hebrews could not settle for less for a God that could be seen and you could grab him and throw him on a cross and beat him and let him bleed blood and so on, putting crown of thorns on him. No. That would be descending in your faith and your understanding and your belief of a deity. The Hebrews wouldn't go down like that. They knew already when they went down by taking on the religions of the other nations, the Most High cast them into captivity or gave them some kind of punishment. So at this point, they didn't want no more punishment. They wanted their laws back. And obviously, if the Romans are going in to their temple and ransacking it and destroying it in 70 AD, that's telling you that the Hebrews weren't trying to deal with a Jesus who didn't make his main concern the temple. So they were trying to keep the temple alive because that was a symbol, an expression of who they were and what they were about, and of their connection to their forefathers' teachings, who never worshipped a Jesus. Abraham didn't worship Jesus. Moses didn't worship Jesus. Jeremiah, Elijah, Amos, none of these guys worshiped Jesus. Even if you say that they prophesied about his coming, they never worshipped him. They didn't prophesy about him, but I'm just saying, if you say that they worship him, that they prophesied about him, the fact is they still didn't worship him. So even if you want to say that Jesus is of God, he's sent of God, just because a prophet prophesies of him does not mean you should worship him and start baptizing in his name and stuff like that, and teaching others to receive salvation through him. No. But they didn't actually prophesy about him. My series is teaching you these things and showing you how to think properly about this topic, that they did not actually prophesy about him. So the mere fact that the Romans went into the temple to destroy it is showing you that they were not into this Jesus Messiah worship. Otherwise, the Christians who were believing in the same Jesus, they themselves would have been upset that the temple was being destroyed, because it would have been significant to them as well. But if you say, well, they were in Hebrews, so they didn't care about the temple, then the Romans would have been destroying the Christians' churches as well. But why weren't they destroying the churches? Because the churches were set up to worship and believe in this Jesus. So obviously the odd one out is the Hebrew walking on the street who loved this temple, because it was a way for him to connect to his God and his forefathers and his laws that he had. So that was what was destroyed, the temples. But notice what was destroyed, the Hebrew temple, not the temples of Baal and Zeus, etc., who the Christians were having their church services in. Because, and I'll close on this point, letting you know that the Hebrews are the Antichrist. They are against Christ. And that final point is saying that the Christians, they had their temples saved, not ransacked and destroyed by the Roman army. Why? Because theirs was the temples that the Roman government set up for them to worship in. The Christians' first houses of worship were not the churches you see outside today. They were in the temples of Baal, the temples of Zeus and Jupiter, the temples of Saturn, the temples of Ashtaroth, the temples of, whatever other pagan deities that there might have been there at that time. And there's this other one I'm thinking of. I won't bother mentioning it here because I'll only get talking about it so much, because that's just going to be a separate video. But there's another temple that they worshipped in that is significant as well, that's more telling, that you hardly ever hear about. So a lesson is going to come on the temples that the Christians worshipped in. They did not worship in they didn't go rent no building to have their first church services, or rent out the upper room and so on for the other services after what it says in Acts chapter 2. No, they worshipped in the temples of evil, the temples of Baal. Those were the first Christian church services. That's where they were held. So when Christians are talking today and singing, like I did when I was a child growing up in the church, about giving that old time religion, and I want to get back to the old time religion and so on, I was singing all along that I want to get back to the worshiping in the temples of Baal and Zeus and Jupiter. I just didn't know it because I was dumb with no history. And that's how they keep you not having history. My videos teach you a lot of history while teaching you the scriptures of what Torah says as well. The Hebrews are the Antichrist, the children of Israel who are scattered. It says the Antichrist is not just one, they are many. And Hebrews are many. And we are scattered in many nations, many kingdoms on the earth. We're going to be regathered again in the end. Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12. The Antichrist is the Hebrews.